Michelle Brundage, welcome as Secretary of Education, Communities and every other portfolio in New South Wales, because you've got about 7 areas that you cover. It's fantastic to have you with us this afternoon. Ross Fox, Director of the National Catholic Education Commission Council, thank you for being with us, because there are quite a number of young people in this country who actually come under either your direct or indirect control, I think. And Richard Bolt, Secretary of Education, Early Childhood Development here in Victoria, and thank you for welcoming us last night at the cocktails at Crown. So, colleagues, the idea for this next period, and I want you to relax because I just need to communicate with you at the moment that whilst we're very interested in what you would want to say, and I know that you want to use the Twitter feed in order to do that, there'll be absolutely no opportunity for you to contribute in the next 15 minutes. Just relax, okay? So that, because I'm going to have the conversation here, if that's okay with you, given our time. But if somebody wishes to send me through a message, can you pick that up for me on the Twitter and just pass me a note? Because I'd love to use the time that we've got in a way that I think will really explore the application of your trajectory, to use your language, for a new and emerging learning agenda with ours. So Michelle, kick us off. When you hear that story of what is happening in Singapore and the region, the current, the new, the emerging, do you make a quick translation into New South Wales and Australia?
Yes, I do. There's a lot of similarities in, the focus on quality teaching and pedagogy practice. And in New South Wales context, I actually see it as a reform journey in New South Wales, where really our first generation of reform has been put in place some building blocks which really focus around great teaching, inspired learning, needs-based funding, rural and remote, and getting the policy settings right. And that's taken us a little while to do that, the last 3 years. And then I look forward and I see the next wave or generation of reform, which is really in some degree handing that baton over after policy formation and the intent that we have as a system to a really relentless focus on learning in classrooms. So the baton changes, in my view, and even further out, if I was to think about in New South Wales, in my mind, a third wave of reform. It's about the second wave of reform where you will identify fragments of innovation. I think it's Valerie Hannon that actually talks about fragments of innovation. And the third wave and the challenge at a system point of view is how you disperse the fragments of innovation at a system level in a size of New South Wales. So,
Let me check 2 things with you, because the part A of your presentation was making it pretty clear around the nature of 21st century competencies, to use that as code, and the way in which you played that out across 5 different jurisdictions. Yep. But the Swiss roll.
The Swiss
roll is fantastic. By the way, that got picked up pretty nicely and translated into the connection with the executive control and the importance of those elements, which is interesting. You might want to reflect on that later. But there were 2 parts to this. One was that kind of 21st century learning agenda around competencies, but the next part was technology as an accelerant, as an enabler, as a catalyst. So how, in the New South Wales context, are you bringing those things together?
Look, I think the first thing is, the focus on pedagogy, and, if I just go to the heart of collaboration, for us in New South Wales, systemness is incredibly important. So we've been very clear about the importance of systemness and collaboration right across the public education system, and there are some things that bind us all together and we do together.
Yep.
There are other things collaboration in terms of the profession, the teaching profession as a collaborative profession, and how important collaboration is within the profession. So we've got it in the system, within the profession, and then you're looking at the students and the collaboration and creating some of the examples that you've given us there about how important collaborative learning has been. And there's no doubt in my mind that technology helps us accelerate some of the meaning of collaboration and networks of either curriculum access, teacher collaboration, student collaboration of things that we haven't done before. So technology is a friend. It can sometimes be an enemy, as we know, but in big systems. But as a friend to help us increase the emphasis on collaboration at system, professional level, and student level.
Can we come back to the question about point of difference later? Because I think that this kind of first cut on a response to what you've laid out resonates so strongly with some of the emerging elements of our own agenda here. So, Ross, as you listen to this, is it an agenda that you recognise? Is it a trajectory that is consistent with where we are? How are you responding to the kind of Asian region story?
I think I was at a gathering in Sydney of Catholic educators yesterday talking about the Melbourne Declaration. And I think actually if we look at the Swiss roll, I think there's a lot of resonance, a lot of consistency. So I think in terms of passion and purpose and focus, Australian education is certainly a lot in common. We'd be exaggerating the differences, I think, if we said that we're actually on about something different. I think all that can be found in a rich articulation in the Melbourne Declaration and in subsequent documents that systems have developed, that in Catholic education we've developed at different levels. So I think there's a lot of resonance. I think I was quite taken by the group scribble analogy for a couple of different reasons. I think we've all been in schools where you walk in and you see one of these digitised whiteboards with a projector and it's never been used. No one knows the software to use it. Now, hopefully that's all behind us and maybe you can't find a school like that now. But my impression is it's like the phases that you outlined, that actually we invested a lot in technology, in the infrastructure, but did it change the relationship between the learner and the teacher? And in that instance, there's no doubt the relationship between the learner and the teachers fundamentally changed by having access to what seems quite a simple tool, but has an amazing sophistication for the pedagogy that's in supporting the pedagogy that's going on in the classroom.
Let me just check on something, because there's a kind of, you've actually used the word systemness, Michelle, and there is a systemness around this work in Singapore, Hong Kong. I mean, they are amazing systems of learning. And when you think about your office, your sector within jurisdictions and across the nation, do you think about this as being a learning system for your schools? I said to you earlier, if I converted, would I immediately be able to absorb the principle of subsidiarity and operate effectively at the appropriate level of decision making? Now, you said, let's not go there, Tony.
And we have.
Is there a systemness?
Well, so there is a systemness, but just going back to how you introduced Catholic education, Tony, you talked about the National Commission having control. In Catholic education, we'd think about solidarity and cooperation. We wouldn't think about systemness as control.
Yeah.
And so I guess our challenge in our own system is that it's mainly voluntary. It's voluntary cooperation. It's a sense of solidarity, of sharing. Now, there's some exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But I think that best, or my view as obviously an advocate and someone passionate about Catholic education, is that voluntary nature hopefully really reflects what a professional in a classroom, a professional school leader should be thinking about, being able to make the trade-off between where they're following an edict or where they're actually judging what is best for the students.
But when you talk about this common agenda between Australia and Singapore, that is a common agenda that you see across Catholic schools in this country.
Well, in terms of the Swiss roll, absolutely.
Right, okay.
High agreement.
Richard, just cut to the chase on this, because I think it would be good actually if you could say something about what resonates, but also maybe different context.
Yep. So thanks. I mean, I think the most striking thing about that presentation was the degree of convergence, which is the word you used in your presentation. The stereotypes that might have existed about the way pedagogy and education generally occurs in Asia. If there are any remaining stereotypes, they'd certainly be disbanded or dispelled by that presentation. And it certainly reminds me of being in a school in Shanghai last year with Minister Dixon. For the first time ever in a Chinese school that I visited, there were student leaders sitting at the table. There was a regional representative, there was the principal, there was some staff, and the principal passionately espoused the view that he wanted his students to learn how to challenge authority. And in fact, it was the first time I'd ever been anywhere where in China, that trip, where on 3 occasions in official meetings the Cultural Revolution was actually mentioned. And I think these are all signs of a tendency to go to a more liberal, to a more engaging form of education, which is broad, which is globally focused. And I would have thought that the differences are much more now about what priorities there are within each jurisdiction. What are the particular areas that we need to make up to do well in those areas, rather than that we're heading towards a fundamentally different paradigm. That's as I saw what was on the screen there. And so in our case, I guess we would say we would like to be further advanced towards the STEM competencies that are very prevalent throughout Asia. But we know that to get there, traditional forms of teaching and learning will not cut it. The interactive, the engaging, the visual, but at the same time with sufficient repetition for core ideas and competencies to be internalised. The greater use of technology, these are all, of course, the hallmarks of how we will do better at the STEM agenda, rather than a resort to traditional methods. And I think your illustrations exemplified that. So I think it's just a question of what priorities to get to excellence, rather than, as I say, heading towards a fundamentally different paradigm.